Hi everyone, excited to go through this video today based on a blog that was written by one of my colleagues up on Community using HTML to build up a little sort of inventory workflow history log to present to the next person in line in the task. I actually think this is a really clever solution and I'll be using it in quite a few demos. Alrighty, let's have a look. Now, before we jump into it, the blog is up on Community. If you want to look, it's the workflow log in task forms. It's written by Ranjit. I'll put the link in the video description. But essentially what he's doing is he's setting a variable value with some HTML. He's then modifying that further down the track, and then he's adding that to the task form as a little label. So I'm going to do it for my purchase request example. Quite a simple form, captures some user information, captures some purchase information. So the first thing that we want to do is set that base log in HTML. So what I'm going to do is I've got the HTML and I can pop that into the chat as well. But what I need into the description, what I need is a set variable value. I'm going to drag that in. Now, obviously, you can do things with dates and you can set context, who's logged in and so on. So I'm actually going to select the variable. I'm going to pop in the value. Now, it doesn't have any values in here. It's essentially just setting up the headers. But what I want to do is I actually want to set the first sort of event that's already happened, which is the initiation. So we've got the action taken header, the action by header, and the comments header. And then I want to start adding bits of information. So initiated on, I've actually already got a request date that's been created. So my request date string, let's add that. But that's essentially just this format date to string action up here, which is taking the request date from the form, which comes in, so UTC and funny old format, and it's going to create a DDMMYY format for me, and then store that as a string. And then what I want to do is just sort of in line with the next one. So the action taken is initiated on, and the action by is the person that kicked off the process. So that's going to go in here. And what I want to do is add the workflow initiator start event, first name, space, last name. No comments to add in this one here. You could, if you wanted to, you could say, kicked off or workflow started or whatever, but we don't necessarily need to do that. So that's my first piece of HTML that's been set, and now we need to go down to my form. So the first task, is my manager approval task here. Essentially, asking that person's manager, we're going to get the information from Active Directory and asking them to approve the task. So a couple of little things to do here as well. First thing I want to do is just a friendly date again. So I'm going to use set variable value to set a date, so of when this event occurred. I don't have a date control necessarily on the form, so I'm just going to use workflow to set that date. So again, I want a set variable value. And what I'm going to do is, and I quite like the friendly format. So I've already got that variable set. It's the manager approval date. And we're going to set that to the context now, the current date. We want that format date to string, just so I can use that DDMMYY format. The date that I want to set is the manager approval date. The format is the same as my initial one here, and the time zone is going to be Melbourne, and we're going to output the date as the date string. So we're just getting set up here. And last but not least, I need a modify string. Pop that in there. And what we actually want to do is replace substring in the string. The source string is the log that we just created previously. The substring is end table tag, close table tag. And the replacement substring that we want in there, I'm just going to copy from Notepad, pop that in. Now we have to just add a couple of extra points here. So what happened? Well, again, this was the event, so it was approved on the manager date string, which is that friendly date format. Then we're going to move to the next here, and that was in the line of who actually carried that out. Now, if you're using something like the Active Directory lookup, you go through the object, pull back that manager's name. Because this is a demo, I've actually hard-coded the person that's going to be accepting it, so that's the name that I'll pop in here. But obviously, you can use variables like we did in the first initiation, solution day, and then the next tag, we want any comments that are coming from this manager approval task. So what I want to do is just quickly edit the form here for the manager approval to allow them to add comments, which is already in there. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to show that initial HTML. So let's very quickly create a little group and call that we'll call it workflow history. And let's just show the background. And we'll drag in a label, which is only going to include the log. So the initial log, so the very first one that's been created. Let's apply the changes. Now we have a comments, so we're just going to modify that string. We want to add the comments in here. So we're going to insert a variable. We're going to go to my task, which is here, form variables, and we are going to add comments, which is there. So that's going to create that new bit of HTML. We're going to create that as the log. So we're just going to keep building on that bit of HTML as it goes through. So that's the first task. And now we want to get to the second task. We've got a little condition here, but we won't do that for the demo. And finance processing, we want to edit the form for that finance task. So when we get the finance task, if this has worked, what we should see, if we do the exact same thing again, one group, one label, and we'll call the group the workflow history again. Make it bold. Header background divider line just for consistency, and the label will insert the log and apply the changes. So if this has worked, when we get to finance, we should see the initiated, then the manager approval and any comments, and finally in the finance approval, we'll see both of those bits of information. So let's publish. Okay, so we can kick off the example from Workflow Cloud. And what we're going to do is just select a department. Let's get some laptops for a new team that we've onboarded potentially. And let's sign the document. Submit. This is going to redirect us to my Nintex. And we'll be able to do all the task responses and everything else in my Nintex. So I'm just going to click on that one that we've just submitted. Got a couple of testers running, as you can see. You can see that initial form in my Nintex. You can see all the stuff that I've requested. Now, if I was in somebody else's as another login, obviously I wouldn't. It wouldn't be a running submission for me. It would be the tasks that I would receive. So let's go to tasks. And we've got our CapEx request task. Now, I'd also use that set instance name action. I think that's really helpful. And we've got our first task. This is the one that went to the manager approval. And we've got my first bit of HTML, which is pretty cool. So we'll approve and we'll add some comments from the manager. So we'll say new laptops required for the team. Submit. So that's going to push that task form away, and the next task will be received shortly. So we'll actually receive a task. Now, what I can do as the initiator, I can go back to the dashboard, I can check on my running instance, and I can see that that was completed, and I can see the completed task, and it's going to go to the next task in line, which was finance processing. So let's go to a quick refresh. That's my old test. So I should have my finance task come through. There we go. And this, if this has worked, if the HTML has worked, it should have 2 rows in the HTML. There we go. So we've got my first one, my initiated on, who initiated it, and also who just approved it. And obviously we're using that friendly date format. You could add the time in there if you needed to. And we've got my comments, which is great. So that's what I wanted to show you today, a little bit of clever HTML using that to track the workflow history and then add that as a little log in the workflow. So hop on community, read the blog. I'll post a link in the video description. And that HTML is going to come in really, really handy. So thanks to Ranjit for writing the blog, clever solution, and a real quick win.